The Nintendo Switch 2 has officially been released into the wild and has already lit a firestorm within the hearts of both eager players and left holes in their wallets as they all swarm to buy the latest console and the many games and accessories for what is likely going to be the company's biggest launch yet. The Switch 2, by the way, is packing a 7.9-inch 1080p display with 120Hz refresh rate, as well as HDR and 4K output when docked at least, which is an upgrade over the original console. So we're talking sharper visuals, smoother gameplay, and the ability to run games like Elden Ring and even Cyberpunk 2077 in both gameplay modes too. So okay, make no mistake that this beefed up hardware could drag Nintendo into the modern era finally, and give us a console that doesn't look like it's rendering Mario in say 480p on a potato from 2017 like before. But is this enough to push people to pay what Nintendo is asking? Of course, there's also the games. Mario Kart World drops day one for $80 American digitally. It has an open world and promises to deliver that fun gaming experience that everyone expects from Nintendo's premier kart racer. And the best part, probably, is thankfully that the Switch 2 has backwards compatibility, which means that your old Switch library isn't bricked, well, mostly, but we'll get into that one later. So, if Nintendo nails all of this, they could push the industry forward, proving that you don't need a PS5 Pro to deliver next generation games, but all you need is this handheld hybrid instead. But is all of this enough from the innovation, the portability, and Nintendo's magic touch to make this thing a winner in the long run? And is this the shot in the arm that console gaming needs to fight mobile and PC dominance in the long run? Well, that all depends firstly if you can afford the thing at all. Switch 2 retails at $450 American, which is $150 more than the original Switch at launch, and the Mario Kart World bundle will set you back an eye-watering $500. This doesn't even begin to describe how base games are now $80 digital and $90 physically. Analysts like Matt Piscatella from Circana, for example, are already warning this could shift the console market to richer and older gamers, and actually end up leaving the kids and the casual players behind, which are Nintendo's bread and butter, in the dust in the future. As Matt Piscatella said here via Blue Sky, he begins with, "Console buyers, y'all are getting old, but at least you seem to be making more, so you have that going for you, which is nice." Matt continues with this, "High-income households are becoming a bigger part of the US console hardware market. 49% of US video game console buyers during Q4 2024 had a household income of at least $100,000 a year. This is a record high, beating the 48% seen in Q4 2021. This group accounted for only 29% of video game hardware purchasers in Q1 2020. Matt had even more to say, which also says 45-plus-year-old buyers accounted for 45% of US console purchasers during Q4 2024, also a record high. Under 44-year-old buyers made up 55% of console purchasers in the quarter, a record low. During Q1 2020, under 44s made up 69%, nice, of purchasers, with 31% being 45 and plus. So that's a lot of numbers. What do they mean? To summarize, based on the data that Matt Piscatella has analyzed, and he's a respectable source for this stuff by the way, console gaming has largely transitioned from being an affordable alternative for kids or younger people to becoming far more of a luxury option for older players instead. The fact that 49% of American console buyers in Q4 of 2024, so that's the last few months of 2024, so that's very recent, were not only older as in 40 plus years, but had average incomes of $100,000 a year, meaning kids are largely being left in the dust, if you will, to buy these things on their own. So case in point, gaming has gotten so expensive for the average consumer that most people can't really keep up or afford new releases anymore, never mind the consoles. I wager that an alarming amount of people who bought Switch 2s likely used credit cards because they couldn't even afford it but wanted it anyways. This is obviously because of FOMO, or fear of missing out, on such a big launch, but as Matt proves, if video games weren't already expensive enough, they've just become something only a certain tax bracket can afford regularly going forward. And when looking at how many people actually meet this higher threshold that are able to realistically afford video games at release and buy things like Switch 2s when they do come out, it's very clear that the average person is just being priced out of affording these games on a regular basis, which is not a good thing considering you kinda need people to buy games in order for this whole thing to exist in the first place. Sure, some will say, but people bought tons of when the Switch 2 released, but you're comparing the launch of a new system versus months or even years down the line when people become more selective with what they buy. Always releases like a new console will lead to reckless spending due to the hype surrounding it. Like this this guy on Twitter who you can see here who spent well over $1,000 and then some for all the accessories and such for their Switch 2 at release. What's crazy is that it's not only Nintendo getting away like bandits, everyone with games on Switch 2 at release are doing this right now. For an example, Cyberpunk Ultimate Edition is $100 Canadian on Switch 2 right now, but when I go look it up, it's sold out everywhere, which means that CD Projekt Red is making bank off the Switch 2 version of an older game that is much cheaper elsewhere. This is true of many other games too. Hogwarts Legacy, as seen here, is $80 Canadian at release digitally and $90 for the deluxe edition. Again, for a game that is over 2 years old and much cheaper on other platforms already. Essentially, companies across the board are selling older games for premium prices right now due to the release of the Switch 2. And people are eating it up, which may seem good in the short term for studios, sure, but in the long term, this could only mean to embolden them to charge more if they keep getting away with it. However, we gotta be real, in a world where inflation's got us choosing between groceries and say a new Joy-Con, this pricing could also tank accessibility. And don't get me started on the whole tariff thing with, Trump's trade policies, which might jack up prices even further. And Nintendo's already dodging China for places like Vietnam and Cambodia when it comes to manufacturing more Switch 2s in the future. So if this thing bombs or even underperforms, which I doubt, but I mean, to be real with you, the industry kind of needs this to be a hit for the well-being of video games in the future. Because currently, according to Ampere's reports via Game Dev Reports as seen here in this article on screen, Ampere's analytics are currently seeing a trend of the game industry as seen here. That the game industry overall, if you can believe it, will grow by a measly 0.9% in 2025 overall in terms of value, with only about a 2.2% increase by 2026, bringing the whole industry to about $205.7 billion by the end of 26. Not a great growth stat considering you have a whole new Switch console releasing right now and everyone from Borderlands to Xbox are planning to also jack their prices up to be more in line with Nintendo, and yet despite these increases in price, we have to also ask ourselves if the bubble will just inevitably pop. And how can the industry only grow by less than a single percent when Nintendo is out here releasing a whole new console? Maybe those numbers will get bigger in time and adjusted, but based on this, it means that the industry honestly could just flatline, and that's kinda scary. Sure, Nintendo's betting big on this, but are they betting on us to eat the cost in the long run, or is hubris finally catching up with the Mario people for once in their lives? And speaking of eating costs, let's call Nintendo out on their anti-consumer nonsense because, well, let's be real, they've been kinda busy with it. Firstly, the price gouging, $450 in the US, but in Japan, it's region locked and also cheaper. It's around $310 for the base model of the Switch 2. And why is the rest of the world getting shafted, but Japan has a cheaper alternative? Surely language settings, which is the reason for the cheaper pricing cost, by the way, doesn't cost 25% or more for Nintendo to manage. It's kind of ridiculous. I guess we're just walking ATMs to people like Nintendo, and then you have the physical games. It's $90 physical for Mario Kart World and American, and guess what? Some cartridges are just download keys. You're paying premium for a plastic shell with no actual game on it, which honestly is kind of insane. Then there's the whole backwards compatibility, which sounds great at first until you see the fine print. Nintendo's testing every single Switch game, but over 100 titles have issues, and stuff like the Labo VR kit straight up bricked and can't be played. As seen here, Labo won't work on Switch 2 at all, so it'll just be relegated to the first Switch and will likely just be largely abandoned. It's not the only game that won't work on Switch 2 compared to the first one either. Other games that have been confirmed to have issues with even launching on Switch 2 due to incompatibility issues include games like Alan Wake Remastered, Alien Isolation, and more. Even Mario Kart World is facing issues right now, as seen here from Insider Gaming. People who bought the game are getting error codes at launch, telling them that Mario Kart World has not been released yet, thus they can't play it even though the game is out and they obviously have the console. The issue is apparently tied to the Switch 2 bundles with Mario Kart included. Apparently the Switch 2's bundled with Mario Kart that has the Mario Kart graphic on the box. Those are the ones specifically that can't redeem the game because the graphic box version is claiming to tell users that the code that they have is already redeemed. Anyway, this just means that anyone who bought the graphic box version of the Switch 2 with Mario Kart can't play the game right now. And all of the Switch 2's games and features only work if Nintendo pretty much gives you the okay to use the thing you just bought. Otherwise, the console, despite being a hybrid handheld, can be bricked and become a useless paperweight pretty much in the future. It's not all bad, as seen here. The Switch 2 is allowing for faster load times on older games, which I mean, I hope so, because otherwise, what even is the point of all of this? For an example, older games like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which ran like molasses on the original Switch, and to this day, those Pokemon Pokemon games are the only ones I have yet to complete myself for the first time in that series ever, because the quality of the experience and the performance of Violet on my Switch was so poor the game was basically unplayable at times. But now if you buy a Switch 2 for $500, rest assured your years old game will finally run at 60 FPS, as this article says here. Wow, these older games are finally transformable and they can finally be played and work as intended, except not really. Even with the Switch 2's beefier hardware as seen here, which reads, while it's not a completely locked frame rate with occasional minor drops to 55 FPS, particularly in biomes dense with foliage, these instances are rare, not noticeable in normal gameplay. So even with the Switch 2's upgrade, it still can't hold a stable 60 FPS on a 2-year-old game that looks the way that it does. And I know the writer here is trying to say, well, 55 is not bad, sure, but it's still not 60 FPS either way. And I don't know about you guys, but I think the bare minimum a console needs to do in 2025 is at least hit 60 FPS. Anything below that honestly is kind of pathetic no matter what, and there's really no excuse for it. In Pokemon Violet and Scarlet, they kind of look like phone games to begin with, so why are they stuttering at all is my question. But Nintendo fans will defend their GOAT no matter what, because they can do no wrong no matter how subpar the products are anyways. And what about Nintendo Switch 2 World Tour? That game that everyone thought would be free but is actually like $10 or so, because Nintendo won't even give you a demo to see the features in your Switch 2 for free. Well, if you want to get 100% out of that demo, you better have money. Not $10, by the way. This comes from IGN and it's titled Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which everyone thinks should be free, requires $95 of accessories and a 4K TV for 100% completion. Yeah, I wish I was kidding, but it's true. Why, you're asking? Certain mini games in World Tour require Switch 2's camera, for example, to complete, which is of course an extra purchase. Not only that, but other features in mini games require the GL and GR buttons, which are not present on the base Joy-Cons and can only be completed if you own a Pro Controller or charging grip, which are of course all bought separately. You also need a 4K supporting TV to complete another mini game that is required in this $10 tech demo, so that kind of sucks too. So in total, if you want the most out of your $10 tech demo for your Nintendo Switch 2, you must pay, in American dollars by the way, as seen here, $54.99 for a Switch 2 camera and either $39.99 for a charging grip or $84.99 for a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller to use those GL/GR buttons. Oh, and don't you dare think to use the original Switch Pro Controller to bypass that $85 American price point, by the way, because the original Switch Pro Controller also doesn't have the required buttons needed. Thought you were slick, huh? Nope. You better fork over that money if you want to see everything that your Welcome Tour demo has to offer, which is again a $10 tech demo that should have been free in the first place. It's kind of sad to see, man, because Nintendo not even including a $10 tech demo when they, back in the day, they had Wii Sports come included with like every Wii at that point. It was a full-fledged video game that was rightfully included to showcase how the Wii worked. And speaking of Wii's, sorry, I meant Mii's, the little avatars you can use on your Nintendo systems, as Polygon reports here, Mii characters are now genderless on Nintendo Switch 2. Yep, you heard that right. Mii's are also now genderless. Oh boy. See this guy on the left? Sorry, that's not a guy, that's a body type now. Same with this long-haired, suspiciously feminine-looking Mii on the right. What's a woman, I hear you ask? Sorry, I'm not a biologist, so I can't answer that without being thrown in the gulag, of course. Weirdly enough, we know this is all performative, since as seen here, the Wii that was introducing the Mii's originally clearly stated that Mii's only had two genders, but now it's 2025, stop being a bigot. And remember, gender is about as meaningless as your opinion on whether Nintendo charges more for their games or not. Then we have this article from Fortune.com Asia titled, Nintendo Switch 2 could breathe new life into the video game giant if Trump's trade war doesn't upend it all. So basically, Trump put tariffs on a lot of Asian countries. I think we all know that, and this includes places like Cambodia, Vietnam, China, etc. And because of this, it has affected what things cost across the world for very obvious reasons. And the industry in general is looking for a genuine lifeline to bring the video game industry back to life. Currently, it's like I said, not growing at an exponential rate. That 0.9% increase is actually abysmal. It means that people aren't buying, which honestly might be a good thing if you want this industry to not become greedier in the future. However, if you make games, you want to of course make more money, and it's hard to do so when people won't open their wallets. Especially, like I said earlier, how 49% of US buyers alone of consoles are now older people, meaning that it's pricing out the younger generation, which is not good considering you kinda need them to keep making profits. As Fortune puts it here, if the video game industry has a champion, it's Nintendo. They basically need Nintendo Switch 2 to be a massive success, actually more like an overperforming gangbuster success, because it's really the only event-like moment in 2025 game-wise that could usher in enough revenue to really raise all tides. Since of course Grand Theft Auto 6 got delayed, we know that already, this is all the industry really has got to keep them going in an influx in 2025, which is, yes, kind of scary if you make games. As seen here in this really nice graph, we can accurately view how many billions of dollars Nintendo has made in revenue over the years. And it's easy to see that their biggest year in a long time was 2021 and 22, since it was following the whole COVID thing, and people were obviously still inside and playing more games, which led to a big boom for Nintendo. But their most recent fiscal year ended in March 30th, 2025, bringing their fiscal year total to $7.6 billion, which is, by the way, a 30% dip from the year prior. Their profits also dropped around 45% year over year, and Nintendo only managed to sell 11.5 million consoles in 2024, which is less than half of what they sold at their peak during COVID, as they say here. As the second Trump administration started up, Nintendo began front-running shipments to get ahead of possible future tariffs. JP Morgan estimated in early April that Nintendo had enough inventory to meet demand for 6 months to a year. Yet, despite this, Nintendo has sold out of pre-orders for the Switch 2 already. So, this could be a good sign that the industry as a whole might be on the track back to being healthy again. But overall, Nintendo, according to Fortune Asia here with their article, is scaling back their projections. They don't actually think that the Switch 2 will be hitting record highs for them, although it could still be too early to tell. And they bring up a good point that the initial boom may be good, but the real test will actually be this Christmas season. How will people look at the Switch 2 when the glitz and glamour wears off and it's seen more as a regular console come this fall? And without the fear of FOMO or hype, will people still buy the console at its asking price? Also, knowing that the games retail for practically, 25% of the console per game sold too is kind of crazy. But the hope here is that with Nintendo releasing a console that is cheaper than say a PS5 Pro or a high-end gaming PC, that a lower spec console might push studios and publishers to spend less and make less graphically impressive games to keep their costs down. But then the issue there is that while the games may cost less to make or develop for these publishers in the future, that they're still going to be charging instead premium $80 or $90 price points per game anyway. So effectively, the hope here is that the industry wants people to pay more for games that are also less graphically impressive than what they got beforehand for cheaper, and they want you to be okay with it. But will you be okay with that or not? I guess let me know that in the comments, by the way. But overall, whether this is good or bad for the industry is kind of a mixed bag in my opinion, because nothing here tells me that this is good for the industry when they want to charge more effectively for less in the long run. And I think if even Nintendo is losing profits like this year over year, 45%, remember, that's a lot of money to lose year over year, then many people will be obviously voting with their wallets in the long run. But in the short term, yeah, Nintendo is going to make a lot of money from this launch, but these are the Nintendo diehard fans. That's kind of expected to happen. But for example, I don't really want to Switch 2 at all. And as someone who isn't an acolyte of Nintendo and can see what they're doing without rose-tinted glasses, what they're actually selling here, frankly, is not worth buying for me, at least at all. My PS5 Pro outclasses this thing in every single way. I frankly just don't really need it. And I'm not really okay with paying insane prices for games that look a generation or two behind either. Nintendo may have just opened the box of Pandora, but I don't think it's really for the right reasons. Either way, you win in the end anyways, because you can either just ignore their insane business practices completely and just save your money, or you can just close your wallet and play your obviously probably huge backlogs of games instead that are far cheaper and full of content already and are probably less buggier too. And instead, just wait years, really, until things inevitably have to backpedal their greed because nobody's buying. And it's actually kind of crazy how the industry doesn't quite realize that players, honestly, just need to be lazy and cheap to win in the end pretty much. And maybe that's the good thing part of all of this, I guess. But I do wonder where the industry will go from now, but that's what I got for you today. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more news. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.